Hello and welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. This week we are going to talk about my perceived, or at least what I perceive, as the best film ever made. 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, directed by Milos Forman. Well, we got a lot to talk about with that, but I am Geoff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I am Jason Oliver, and I should mention this is another quarantine episode, so please forgive any technical audio issues. We are recording via Zoom in socially distanced locations.
Jason, that's just a nice way of Jason to say we've all been committed, and we are currently, we may have to pause for a moment when medicine is when our prescriptions are handed out to us.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
As we shuffle up to the window.
Give me the good stuff.
Give me the good stuff. Yeah. So 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So where to begin with this? I didn't really know about this movie until I was about 12 years old or so. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but in 1989, there was this little movie called Batman, and it had this guy in it named Jack Nicholson. Now, I know these are all, pretty deep cuts here, guys, but he played this character named the Joker, and I fucking loved every minute of that movie, and especially Jack Nicholson playing the Joker. And it was one of those things where I knew who Jack Nicholson was. Everybody knew who freaking Jack Nicholson was. But after that, I was like, I want to see every movie he has ever made. And I think I got pretty damn close in the 12 months following the release of Batman. Mm-hmm. But One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I mean, as good as Chinatown is, as good as The Last Detail is, as good as Easy Rider is, and as good as The Shining is, which is probably where I knew him best from as a kid.
Right.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is one of the most haunting and maybe life-changing movies I've ever seen in my life.
Huh.
Even as a young kid, I could grasp what the movie was saying, and grasping how it deals with people who are a little bit different, and it's not great, people. It's not great how the world deals with different types of people.
Right.
And I realized that early on, and I realized the value of there being somebody willing to rattle the cage a little bit, if you will, and the value of the lip service of standing up with that person versus actually doing something with that person. And I realized that at a pretty young age. I don't know exactly where some of that comes from, but I'm sure we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. But this movie, to this day, still affects me in ways that every time I watch it, I'm surprised that it still affects me as deeply as it does. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that too. But I'm going to what do they say? What do they say when they give up the floor?
Are you deferring to someone, Geoff?
I'm going to defer to somebody. And Chuck, you stepped up. So Jason, why don't you go ahead and take it from here?
Well, that's very effusive. I did not realize that, I don't think, about you, Geoff.
I will admit that this is you guys mostly know me as the guy who fucking salivates at the idea of a new Marvel movie.
Goes
to great lengths to even scar my flesh for the 007 franchise. It's this one's a little bit more personal to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I like this movie. I think it's kind of impossible not to, unless you're Ken Casey, to like this movie. But yeah, I mean, to me, I do remember seeing this at a young age. I do remember being disturbed by it. I do remember kind of, understanding that there's something wrong with how we treat people that we don't understand in society, or that we don't know, that we perceive that we maybe have this perceived self-importance of we need to make them more like normal, and what that means to them and how subjective that is, right? Yeah, I definitely, I mean, we'll get into the ending obviously and how much that disturbed me definitely as a child. It was kind of the first time I'd ever really seen or understood the idea that a solution like that could be medically not plausible, but medically approved, right?
Well, not just approved, like held to high regard for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Nobel Prize winning treatment.
Yeah. That was pretty eye-opening when I first saw this movie. I think it's an odd movie in a lot of ways. It's, I think, very much of its time in the sense that it's like we talked about a little bit last week, where it's not really a traditional narrative. It's a lot more about what it's trying to say and the characters that it's built around. You don't get a lot of character-driven movies like this anymore. You really don't. It is very unconventional. It feels very much a part of the counterculture of the time as well.
But it's also out of New Hollywood too.
Yes, that as well. And not just because of the Ken Casey and Jack Nicholson involvement. It just feels, like very much like we're trying to shake up societal norms with this movie and shine a light on some things. Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful movie. It is, and it infuriates me every time I see it. It makes me fucking angry. So yeah, there's that.
So,
for me, yeah,
finally we'll get to you.
Yeah, somebody defer to me already, damn it.
So Geoff, tell us more about what you like about it.
You guys are a bunch of nurse ratchets in here. So yeah, similar for me. I watched this movie very young, probably with my father, maybe on TV. I don't remember exactly where I saw it, but I had a different reaction to it. I think I latched on to McMurphy's character and Chief and focused on their successes more than the failure of the system, so to speak. But yeah, it's one of those movies that I had a lot of questions about at the end. Some of those were kind of answered by the book when I finally read it, which is interesting to know that there is some finality in the book to the things you don't really get a clear picture on in the movie. But yeah, I love it. I've always loved it. Probably watch it every few years. If I see it on TV or something, it's just one of those movies that I'll just keep watching. In my opinion, probably Jack Nicholson's my favorite performance of his, as much as I love The Shining. This has like every great aspect of Jack Nicholson in it. Yeah. His crazy, he's somewhat endearing in here, like small moments of his endearing as in as good as it gets or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, it's the full Jack Nicholson treatment in this movie, and I love it.
Yeah, because like there are times where, yeah, you're right. He's endearing. He's bucking the system. He's also he gets fucking pissed
Yep.
at times in this. You get the full range. You get the full Nicholson.
He's
Uh,
differential at times where he's like, okay, maybe I can play along. Let's see how that goes. He's sarcastic.
He's also an observer at times.
Yeah.
Yes.
He locks into this battle of wills that just becomes uncontrollable for both sides. And they both become, I think, their worst selves. And it's a fascinating study.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could even look at this as how toxic relationships become. I mean, just in general, and I'm not even talking about like most of the time you hear about toxic relationships, it comes from like a romantic side of things. But there's toxicity here between a lot of characters, and it's never addressed, and it only ever gets worse, and it's only ever going to get worse. The fact that things didn't really, really like the fact that certain people didn't do certain things sooner is amazing.
Yeah.
But it's also of its time too. I mean, this is 1962, 1963 is when this takes place. There is still that idea of that. We talked about it last week with Blue Velvet being kind of a, hey, things are kind of covered in that nice 1950s sheen. It's this is still trying to achieve that as well, with not great results, because this isn't the outside world. This is where people are trying to get answers for the things that they can't talk about in the outside world, and they're still being treated as if they're in the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they're not being treated like it's the outside world, it becomes even more damaging. This is a complicated movie because of how the characters are, and you are kind of forced to sympathize with these people. And some of those people you don't really want to sympathize with. Like, I really don't want to sympathize with Harding. He's an asshole, but at the same time, it's like, he obviously has problems and he wants help. He doesn't know how to ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
Tabor is one of the few committed people, and he's committed because he's a criminal, and he acts like a criminal at times, particularly in how he antagonizes other people.
Speaking of Tabor, real quickly, this is Christopher Lloyd's first movie.
That's
wow.
amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you're going through this, but the casting in this film is just...
Oh yeah. I've got a
insane.
little bit more about that here in just a minute. I will say that
Lloyd is so expressive in this movie. Like,
he's got a funny face, man. He's got a funny face.
Yeah.
The things he can do with his eyebrows is bonkers. But then you've got, so like this is, Christopher Lloyd's first movie. It is William Redfield, who played Harding, one of his last movies. He died the next year from leukemia.
Oh wow!
Oh, wow.
So I mean, like you're finding people at the start of their careers and at the end of their careers and at the middle, at their high point of their careers, like Nicholson, and like you have a young Danny DeVito in this movie too, and it's the
God, I love Martini. Sorry.
Oh yeah, well he's like a little child.
Yep.
But
hit me.
He's just so excitable. So this Blu-ray that I have of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has talks about like the notable cast people, the director. Then it has like this notes and like a little bit of a essay on McMurphy, which is Nicholson's character. But one of the notes in here was first and foremost, this film was filmed in a functioning mental hospital. So some of the extras are actually patients, and they're caretakers, and they're for those who were like, really like almost vegetative. They were their caretakers at the hospital, or their powers of attorney approved them to be in the film, and they all got paid. They actually all got pretty well paid, actually, for being there. And the guy who plays Dr. Spivey, who I think McMurphy, when he first meets him, calls him Dr. Spiffy. But anyway, Dr. Spivey was the actual doctor at the hospital that they filmed at. He was not an actor. He was the actual head doctor.
He did pretty good for that.
He did. And that whole scene where he and McMurphy are talking when McMurphy's first dropped off, that's a very Kubrickian scene. It's just shot, reverse shot, very low talking, just exposition on character. But there were 1,200 actors that were auditioned before the 17 were selected for the speaking roles.
Wow.
The supporting speaking roles. Jack Nicholson was not the first choice. It went through Gene Hackman, Marlon Brando, James Caan, and Foreman's first choice was Burt Reynolds.
Oh man, could you imagine this movie with Burt Reynolds?
Could you imagine his laugh as he's laughing at the crazy? He would be one of the crazy people. Yeah.
They did a perfect job of landing Nicholson. Go ahead, Jason.
I could see it, though. I could see Reynolds in this role. Especially in that time. Yeah, totally could see it.
In that time and doing the basketball stuff, like, is so...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My guess is actually what's probably funny why Burt Reynolds was maybe not available was he was probably working on it at Long Last Love, which is a disaster for him.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and a disaster for Peter Bogdanovich, too. Both behind the scenes in the promotion and during or in the actual movie itself. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, like, they had to find the exact right people to play the exact right types of people. And Nicholson and Louise Fletcher went and like spent time like hanging out with these people, actually watching an electroshock therapy session, which I can't imagine is easy.
No.
Which I can't imagine why that still happens today. It doesn't seem to actually do much of anything, but I could be wrong. I'm not a doctor, by the way, guys. I don't know if you guys know this. I'm not a doctor. But anyway.
Why do you insist on us calling you Dr. Arbuckle then? That's weird.
Well, because every Friday I administer enemas.
Yeah, that's true.
You have to be a doctor to do that sometimes.
Crazy
anyway,
wild doctor.
Yeah. I don't know if you have to be a doctor to do it, but I say you do. So anyway. Say what?
We lost you a little bit there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, so okay, so right, so you have all of these characters where you have, and you meet them early on, just before McMurphy gets dropped off by the correctional, by the state correctional peoples. But you have Harding, who I've already talked about. He's neurotic. He has been kind of emasculated by his wife, but I mean, he is kind of an asshole. So it's like, I kind of don't blame her. He thinks very highly of himself. He's he uses big words. He's constantly antagonized by Tabor, who's Christopher Lloyd, who just doesn't have any sympathy for people who think so highly of themselves, really. And I don't blame them. Sometimes those people need to be fucking put in their place. Then you have Billy Bibbit, who's a stutterer, who is unclear exactly why he's there. He did seemingly have a girlfriend that he wanted to marry, But Nurse Ratched, who's Louise Fletcher, and we've got lots to say about her. She is friends with Billy's parents.
Right.
And it seems almost as if Billy's just being punished for dating a woman and wanting to marry a woman that his mother had not met or knew anything about.
Well, then he tries to kill himself.
And then he tried to kill himself over this. But I also feel like it's possible that the girl that Billy was dating maybe was of ill repute, perhaps?
I have a feeling that that Billy's parents are probably of affluent society.
Possibly.
They are probably already exasperated by his stuttering.
Yes.
And that they probably tried every terrible trick in the book to get him to stop stuttering, which has probably only made his stuttering worse. So they're already
There's
probably
only one scene in which he does not stutter.
Yes,
That's really
they're already
important.
probably embarrassed by him. And then I would agree. He's fallen in love with a woman. I would probably guess not someone they would approve of.
Yeah.
And then he's a victim of his parents, most definitely. Yeah. And they've driven him into an insane asylum because they'd rather forget him than be embarrassed by him.
Well, not necessarily forget him, but make him somebody else's problem to fix.
Right.
Yeah. Something that, as they would say, something that they would not wear.
But he's also out of the picture.
Yes.
They can live their lives without him being the specter over it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you have Martini, who is Chuck's favorite. That's Danny DeVito.
Fucking Martini is awesome.
He's not my actual favorite, but he's awesome.
Sure, but he's
Danny DeVito. The way he smiles in this is so infectious.
Right,
Yes.
and like I said, he's like a child.
Yeah, the innocence. Yeah.
Yeah, he is probably. I suspect he's retarded. And that's why he's there. That happened a bunch back then.
Yeah, for sure.
So he's probably mentally handicapped in some way, or autistic or something, but he presents as a child. Cheswick, he's just a nervous wreck. He is just an absolute nervous wreck, and everything is too much for him to handle.
I identify so much with Cheswick. Cheswick would be the extreme version of me if my anxiety were left unchecked.
Yikes! So Chuck, we better when Jason requests something, we better give it to him.
he's just. Oh man, I feel so badly for Cheswick.
Well, the other thing also is that
he's wound so tight.
Right, and he doesn't really fit in with anybody because he wants to be friends with the perceived strong person, right? Like he's almost like the little chihuahua around the bulldog at times.
Yeah.
Hey, boss, where are we going?
Right, and when Harding presents himself as the guy who's to be followed, he desperately wants to side with him. And then Harding just throws him away in that first scene. And, and it's like, then he latches on to McMurphy when he shows up. But anyway, so then, like I said, Tabor, he's one of the committed people. He's got an anger problem for sure, at least, and he probably committed a crime because of it. And then another committed person is Chief, and he's everybody says he's a deaf mute. He's deaf and dumb. But we get to know more about him, and he tells a story about his dad that's pretty sad, and it explains why he presents the way he does.
It explains a lot about what he does too.
Yep.
Also interesting to note at this point, if you don't mind, that in the Ken Kesey novel, Chief was the narrator.
Yes.
So you know early on in the book that he's not really a deaf mute. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of crucial to a really great scene in this movie that you don't know that you think he's a deaf mute, but yeah.
Continue. And so there's your main cast of characters. There's Scanlon, who's got the big bushy beard. He's one of my favorite guys. Just
He's
the
great.
bushy
Yeah.
beard. He's great.
Yeah.
Oh, and when they're on the fucking boat, it's like the famous Dr. Scanlon, and he like nods and like stands up a little straighter.
Yeah,
That
they give
kills me.
You also have Michael Berryman in the background of all this movie, which is great.
Yes.
Well,
but
you also
nobody
have-
ever interacts with him.
Nope, they give him some liquor later. But
yeah, they do.
You also have David Price, pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, as
Yep.
Bruce Fredrickson.
What?
Vincent Schiavelli. I always joke
yeah.
that David Price looks like Vincent Schiavelli.
Yeah, I forgot the Vincent Sheep. Then there's also the other guy who I think was in a bunch of other movies in the 70s. Let me see if I can find his name here real quick. Seafeld. William Duell.
That's Chevelle's best friend, right?
Yes, and I think they're lovers too.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I get that impression as well.
Yeah.
I think they're lovers, and I didn't really realize that until later. But there's one point where I can't remember what scene it is, but it's heavily implied that's.
Well, they also have their beds very close together.
They push them
after
together
the
at the party. They push them together. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And my suspicion is that's why they're there.
Probably.
Maybe, yeah.
So so that's our those are the people who are typically in group session. It's half of the ward essentially is in group session. The other half are just like Mancini. He's just shuffling around. He gets tired. That's his main thing. He gets very tired. He sometimes just wants to go back to bed, but the goddamn orderlies won't let him.
I'm tired, and it's a lot of baloney. It cracks me.
It's a lot of baloney.
Wait, is it Banchini the one that Jack gets to lift him up on his shoulders to say
and then he wants to walk back to the bench like, Banchini, where the fuck are you going?
It's so good.
So
back
good.
over there, back to Chief.
So good.
But yeah, most of the other people who are not in group session have severe issues. Like they have legitimate issues. A lot of them are bedridden, or they're invalids, or they're got severe mental issues, and you can understand they're there for real issues. The people in the group meetings, the people that we get to know the most about, are essentially either there instead of jail, or they're there because of because they can't feel like they can leave, because they never really get any help, and that's becomes
letting
a very
that cat out of the bag awful early. No, you're right, 100% right.
But they're and that becomes the main sticking point of the problem with the system, and it's the system now that becomes there are agents of the system, and there are the people who are trapped in the system, and that's really what this movie's about. So we meet Randall McMurphy. He gets dropped off by just by the correctional facility because he won't do his work at the work farm. He's been thrown in jail, or he's been at least convicted of something, not terribly serious, as when he's asked by Dr. Spivey.
No, it's pretty serious. It's statutory rape.
Well, right, but he's been in and out of most of the time.
He told me she was 18.
I mean, his lack of remorse there is really important because it becomes a part of his arc.
Sure, I mean, so like prior to the last time he was thrown in, most of the time that he's there, or that he's been thrown in jail, has been for
fighting and fucking.
He fights and fucks too much.
Yeah.
So he because I think he says there's at least I can't remember if it's 5 or 8, but
he says 5.
5 instances of assault, which indicates that he probably just gets into bar fights and he gets hauled off to the jail for a few weeks and then he's let out and he gets into another fight. And so, but yes, the most recent time is statutory rape. It was a 15-year-old girl who said she was 18. To which he was like, "Hey, you said you're 18, so let's party."
And it's interesting too. Ken Kesey in the book makes him Kesey, however you pronounce it, makes him a redhead, which is kind of funny, because that gives you an immediate impression in the 60s or 70s of what Randall McMurphy is like. Unfortunately, but that's the way people thought about redheads. If that makes sense.
Explore that a little bit more. I don't know this.
You don't know that redheads are joked about, well, maybe now joked about, but prior thought of being violent. Redheaded stepchilds, they always have problems. They always have issues.
Well, I knew about redheaded stepchild, but I just, whenever I think of redheads, I just think it's like, oh, this goddamn Irish.
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, his last name is McMurphy, so he probably
Right. He probably was Irish, yeah. So that probably plays to a lot of drunken, brawl fighting, hooligan.
Yes.
That makes sense. Yeah,
his name and his hair color were supposed to indicate a lot of that. But
okay, well, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So anyway, but at the same time, the doctor asks him, it's like, well, do you think that there's anything wrong with your brain or with the way you think or whatever? And he says right up front, it's like, not a damn thing. And you see right out of the gate, he is really trying to take advantage of the system.
Yep.
He knows he doesn't want to go to jail, and he doesn't want to do whatever labor that he was assigned to do, which probably was not that hard.
Yes, and he also thinks he has to serve his time here and be cleared, and he'll go.
Right, and that will serve. It will be time served.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And but the hospital knows that he's probably lying and that he's probably just lazy. In fact, one of the people that are reviewing his case is like, yeah, he's just lazy. He's just a good for nothing, basically, and he's just trying to take us for the ride. So he just thinks he's gonna, he'll spend 2 months here and he'll walk and everything will be great. There's the second scene in which there's a group meeting. He's watching the patients and he's just kind of taking it all in. He's just taking it all in. And they start yelling at each other, particularly Tabor and Harding are yelling at each other. And at first he thinks it's really funny.
Uh-huh.
But by the end of the meeting, he realizes this was maybe a mistake. And he may be in over his head because these people, one, have issues. He just thinks that all these people are drooling idiots and he would just walk around like nothing's wrong. Or he thinks he could control them, but he really can't. And they have sincere issues. And maybe what's more is he gets his first indication that maybe the person they're supposed to talk to the most and take their orders from isn't really helping them. She hasn't gone full villain yet.
No.
But she's forcing people to talk. And they may not have anything to talk about, but so what are they there for? What are they doing? What's this hospital really doing for them?
Right.
And unfortunately, this is probably still done today. Group sessions, I don't think, are particularly great for people who have different problems. But that's just me.
Right. I think it's important, too, though, to note that Ratchet, even though she's a villain, she fully believes what she's doing is helping people.
Yes, but she's an agent of the system, though. She
is not an evil person. She says one thing in this movie that I'm like, okay, yeah, that is maybe one or two. But she's not an evil person. She's just trying to help. She's just not doing it the right way.
I would say that's the case mostly until the end. Which
Yes,
obviously
I agree.
We're
I
getting
agree.
there. But
Well,
the way she treats Billy is particularly
I mean, that's the moment for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not helpful, and she knows it.
Right.
She just wants to win this battle of will that she's waging with McMurphy over Billy.
Yep.
well, over the whole
ward, yeah. But
Yeah.
but Billy represents that in that moment,
Yeah.
and she even recognizes that Billy has improved. He's in a moment where he's actually healthy to some degree, right? Where
He's got confidence. He has confidence in himself. Something
he's
good
overcome his stutter. He's got confidence, correct? And she immediately works to dismantle that, and that is unconscionable.
Right.
Well, I think it begins even earlier than that. Though,
I agree, but that is cementing.
That is cementing that she will never really change.
Right.
And therefore, because she's the agent of the system,
Mm-hmm.
that the system won't really ever change.
Right.
There's a quote here in this little essay here. Where's it at? But basically it's, here we go. Talking about McMurphy, he lives to buck the system, but as any anti-authoritarian knows, the system bucks back.
Yeah.
Right.
And boy, does it buck back when you are fighting against it alone. I think he is making an impression on the people that he's in there with, but they are not the people that can fight his fight with him.
Right.
No, and it's shown pretty early in the World Series watching vote. I think it's their third or second meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
That he thinks he's getting through to these people.
It's the
and
third
that they
session,
will trust they will trust and follow him in a vote, and he only gets 2.
Yeah, so that's where I want to go next, because I mean, like, this is where I say, because beforehand, Nurse Ratched is not a villain yet. She is the representation of the authority that McMurphy is anti-authoritarian to, but she is not yet an out-and-out villain until this third session.
Yeah.
He forces Billy to talk, which is difficult for him to do to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about this girl that he loved, and she immediately tears him down for loving her.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
By bringing up his mother, somebody who's already another problem of his.
Yep.
And the confusion in his face, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And Randall, RP, sees it too, where he's like, the fuck are you doing? And like, he is watching her tear down this kid, which, by the way, he says one of my favorite things about Billy, when he's like basically saying he's like 18 or something like that. And he's like, he says basically, it's like, yeah, he's just a kid. He should be out bird dogging chicks and banging beaver.
Right.
I say bird dogging.
Well, that's after he realizes he's not committed. He's there voluntarily with air quote.
But anyway, so he's he's watching this kid get torn down essentially, and seeing the system work away at this person who's perceived as different, which does also play a part in something the Chief says later. And so he's realizing, it's like, oh, this fucking bitch is, just basically killing this kid in front of everyone. And she's humiliating him.
Right.
In front of the group, in front of people, some of which are not able to be humiliated. And she takes advantage of that with him. And so at that point, I think, like, already McMurphy's looking to, kind of play the system and kind of rattle the cage and rock the boat a little bit, or whatever euphemism you want to use. But it's at that moment that he realizes he has to beat her, and he has to get everybody else to support him in this because she is a bad person. And that's when I think he almost interrupts and say, hey, there's this work schedule. Can we move it to work at night so that we can watch the World Series in the day? Which is interesting. It's probably when I was a kid and I first watched this, I didn't really fully understand that in 1963. Well, no, in 1963, most of the games would have been played in the day anyway.
Oh, right.
And certainly they're in Oregon. So, yeah, it's even earlier in the day. It's probably like a it's
11 or 1 o'clock.
It's probably a morning start, late morning start. So, he's just asking this question, and he wants everybody to get involved. And it's like, hey, the World Series, doesn't everybody care about this? And he realizes that he's the outsider in this sense. Most people don't give a shit. They're wrapped up in their own problems. They don't care about the World Series. And they also have been manipulated into not caring about the other stuff that goes on outside the walls.
In those first two scenes, and this is critical.
They're terrified to do anything contrary to Ratchet's wishes.
Well, yeah, Harding at one point says it's. I think he's the one who's like, "Are you fucking crazy?" It's like we can't go up against that.
Yeah, they don't want to defy the system.
Right, which is important for the next scene because he's now realized none of these people are going to stand up for themselves whatsoever. So he's sitting thinking when he wants to be watching the game while a Monopoly game is going on. And we have that other martini thing with the hotel when he keeps putting the hotel on the board. It's hilarious.
And Harding's like, you do not have a
he's like, hotel.
Hotel.
Like it costs $1,000 for 4 houses and another $1,000 for a hotel. You do not have a hotel.
But then he tries to, he shoots them all with water to get them to shut up.
Yeah, and then, he's had enough.
Yes, but then he tries to teach them a lesson by saying, we can buck this system. I'm going to pick up this fucking sink or whatever the hell that
therapy is. The water therapy.
Yeah, the hydrotherapy station.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw it through the window. And, he gets some good bets, like a $25 bet from Harding, who's like, there's no fucking way. I know you're not going to be able to do it. As crazy as I am. But he can't do it. And when he walks out, I think this line's really important. He says, well, at least I tried.
Yeah.
To buck the system. None of you are trying. I'm the only one trying.
Exactly. And you cannot make change unless you actually try to make change.
Right.
Which also has, there's a dual meaning to that too, right? Like there's a system fighting and there's also a personal meaning to that. If you really do have problems in your life,
you have to try to get better.
You have to try to get better or you will never get better. There have been so many people I've known in my life where they know they have a problem, but they come up with excuses why they can't do anything about it.
Or they always blame somebody else for their own problem. Or they blame
somebody else. Yeah. And so it's like, well, it's them over there that's
preventing me from, exactly.
Yeah, and it's like, well, you have to at least try to make things better. Now, whether that's on a global basis, on a macro or a micro scale, doesn't really fucking matter. It ain't going to get better on its own.
Right.
So yes, Chuck, I'm glad you brought that up because that is at least I tried, as he walks away defeated, means more than
just the line. Yeah.
Well, and it means more than the line.
Yeah.
It means more than failing. Because, did you not even try to pick? I mean, you can look at it and say, well, you're not going to be able to lift that. I can look at anything and say, well, I can't lift that. Well, unless I try, I'm never going to know.
Right.
What if it was made out of, what if that marble wasn't really marble and it was just painted fucking plywood and he just lifts it right up and then throws it through the fucking window and leaves? Well, yeah, they didn't know that because they never tried.
Right.
So I'm getting all worked up about this movie,
goddamn. Yeah, it's great. And I think the next scene is the 9-9 vote, right?
Yes. Yeah. So meeting number 4, because meeting number 3 ends with Ratchet just like, fuck off, little bug. It's like you're nothing. You didn't even get. You only got 3 votes to change it. I don't think it's worth talking about anymore. And she shuts down the whole thing. Right. And of course, RP's pissed because it's like, hey guys, come on. All this talk about you wanting to do, wanting to stick it to Ratchet, because they always talk about that ship and they never do anything about it. God damn it. I'm fucking pissed.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, so you're right, Chuck. So the next day, he's like, I want to bring this to another vote again, because now he knows the rules, and now he wants to play by those rules. And
he thinks he can win this time.
It's
another game. It's another vote. Let's go.
Yep. And
doesn't he say at one point that?
It's not even him. Actually,
likes a rigged game. Is that? Does he
that's
say
later.
She likes a rigged
later.
Yeah, he says
likes
it later,
a rigged game. Yeah.
It's not even him that brings it up. It's Cheswick that brings it up the second day. He's like,
"Isn't there another game today?"
Yeah. And he lights up. He lights up. Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I'm breaking through."
Right, an idea has lived beyond that day that was originally brought up. So that's when she's like, "Well, I don't really see, but if you want to go ahead and vote," she at least lets them vote because she thinks she's got it won already. Right. Then everybody in the group wins, and like RP is like, "Hey, how about that? Fucking landslide!"
Right. She changed the rules again.
And she changes the rules. She moves the goalpost.
Yep.
And she's like, "Hey,
there's 9 other people in this board.
So right now it's just tied, and you don't have a majority." And so he goes around. This kills me. He's trying to get other people to raise their hands. This is when he goes up to Michael Berryman.
He's like,
he just looks at him and he's like, yeah. And he just like waves off.
And how about the dancing guy in the background all the time? I love him.
Oh my God, that guy. That guy is one of my favorite. He's just living his best life, just dancing.
Yeah, he didn't give a shit.
He doesn't give a shit about nothing. He even dances with them. It's like, hey, raise your hand,
Yep.
We just need one more vote, raise your hand. Well, he eventually approaches Chief. And Chief, still playing deaf and mute, just kind of looking at him. But he tries, like, just raise your hand, because he's already gotten Chief to try to play basketball with him, and he thinks he's breaking through the Chief, at least. But he's like, hey, just raise your hand. You just need one more hand. And he's like, fuck it, all of you. And he starts to walk away to find the next person. And the rest of the group is like, holy shit, Chief's raising his hand.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, and he's like, well, holy shit, we got the fucking majority. Well, Nurse Ratchet has closed down the meeting and has decided that there's no more votes allowed. And this is when he realizes that she does like a rigged game. She can always make the rules to change the outcome to her needs. Which, again, compare that to society. If you make enough people uncomfortable and they have enough power, they will change the rules so that no matter how uncomfortable you make, they will take the victory. They'll snatch the victory from you.
Right. Sorry.
No, and then this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. He then just decides, well, fuck it, I'll just have my own game. And he sits on the bench and he looks up at the TV that's turned off, and he's calling play by play. And everybody's gathering around him, and they're hooting and hollering with him. And he's like, "Somebody get me a fucking wiener before my head explodes." And he's like calling his own game, and that's when he really thinks he's got everybody on his side. He still really doesn't, because these people are just enamored with him. They don't really follow him, at least by the majority. They're entertained by him at the best, I would say.
Yeah, this is funny that maybe I'm a bad parent, but this is around the time my kids are 14 and 11 that we all probably would have seen this somewhere in that area, right? Yeah. So I watched it with my kids last night, and they were both cheering when Chief raised his hands and going, Chief, 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 Chief. And then, and then the baseball scene happened, and they're all like, yeah. And that's the memory I have of this movie. Those, from when I was a kid, like those moments that just made me feel good. Even if these people, and even if these people didn't really understand what they were cheering for or why they were cheering, it's the first time a lot of them had a good time in a long time. Because even when they were playing cards with each other, playing games with each other, they're constantly bickering.
Fucking bickering constantly.
They're bickering all the time. But this is a moment, and there's a bigger one coming soon, which is fucking wonderful. But where they all work together and enjoy something.
Yeah.
Like Mac's methods are working more than the system's methods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, that makes the system nervous.
Yes, and you can tell in her look, man, the way she's looking over
she
there,
is
she's
just
like, I'm losing the room.
Yeah, and it's daggers constantly coming from her eyes. Like, Louise Fletcher has such fucking ice cold eyes that I can never look at her as anything but a fucking villain. Even when she's a good guy in fucking Exorcist 2.
She's so sweet.
Villain.
She's so sweet in Dead Kids. Oh, I love her so much in that movie. But it's like, oh, you're Nurse Ratched. How is that possible?
She's also the lady in Flowers in the Attic. She's scary lady.
Yeah, she is. Ooh, she's scary in that. Yep.
Some VC Andrews. Just drop some VC Andrews on you.
That's hilarious.
Middle-aged housewife. Boom.
No, that was one of those movies that, like, my mom read that book and it came on TV.
Every mom read that book.
Every mom read that book. And it came on TV. She's like, ooh, this is a good one. I watched it. It's like, damn, this is a good one.
Yep. It's pretty good. It's creepy. Yeah.
But anyway, no. She realizes at that point that she has a
battle
nemesis.
Now. Yeah.
And on top of that, she uses that. And I think this is fucking disgusting. Because now all the doctors get together. And at one point, all the doctors are talking to him. And, he's just kind of answering their questions however he would answer the question. Well, they all get back together and it's like, oh, yeah, he's just a lazy asshole who
this is after they get on the boat, so you should talk about the boat scene.
Oh yeah, because this is when she basically gets to kind of stick the sword in a little bit. I guess there's two scenes that we really need to talk about. Three scenes technically. Two are very similar. First and foremost, McMurphy is really, really, really interested in Chief.
Yes.
I don't know if it's somebody that he buddies up to because he's thinking prison terms. He's the biggest guy. Because it's like at one point it's like, God damn, you're built like a mountain.
Yeah.
Or if it's just he's just curious about this guy. I don't know which one it is, but he is constantly trying to bring Chief in to stuff that's going on. And at one point, he's on the basketball court and he's thinking it's like, well, fuck, that guy probably pretty good at hoops. He's pretty big. And by the way, Will Sampson, I don't know why he didn't get nominated for an Oscar for this.
I do.
Huh?
I do.
You do?
Racism.
Oh, yeah. But Brando sent that one lady up to talk about racism. That didn't fix it?
It didn't fix it.
Okay. But it got fixed for Graham Greene later, 15 years later for Dances with Wolves, right? Anyway, so yeah, he's Will Sampson's. Whenever I see a movie and he shows up, it's like, it's Chief. Yeah,
I love Chief so much. I love him. I love him.
He's juicy fruit. Anyway,
but when go ahead.
No, so like RP's like, hey man, get. It's like put in the hole, and that's when he gets on top of Bancini, and it's like, hey, let me, I'm trying to show you how to. He's almost like fatherly to Chief in some ways, like he's trying to trying to show him, it's like, hey, do this, and of course Chief just doesn't really do anything. He gets a little frustrated, but he's not ever mad at Chief. He's just
no,
it's like, well, I tried. Again, it's the idea of I tried. Anyway, you were going to say, Chuck.
I was going to say, actually, this pairs perfectly because the next scene with Chief that I think is important, and it leads to the boat scene, is when McMurphy has him lift him out of the fenced area.
Oh, yeah. It's like, give me a boost. Yeah.
And he gives him a boost, and McMurphy doesn't see this, but when he runs away towards the bus, Chief smiles.
Yeah,
and
he knows exactly what he's done.
It's the first indication that you're like, okay, Chief is in there for real. Like, there's something more to this guy, which for me is always like, I love that scene when he smiles. I'm like, oh, Chief, like,
yeah, it's like, here he comes. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so because there's also a scene where they're actually playing basketball against the orderlies,
which I think is a little later, but yeah,
it is a little later, but it's kind of the culmination of, because it's like, hey, Chief, just stand here, and when we give you the ball, you put it in the basket.
Do you think? Okay, I'm going to ask a question. I want your take on this. Do you think that Chief was in there all the time, or do you think that McMurphy helped him emerge again?
I think, based on what Chief said, and Geoff, jump in any time, based on what Chief said about his father later in the movie, that he was in there all the time, but he was afraid to have his mind taken away from him like his father did.
Yeah.
So he didn't react to anything. But I think, on a second note, that McMurphy did kind of bring him out of his shell against his will, almost. Like, he just could not respond to this man who he, for lack of a better term, was like, he was falling in love with him as a friend. Like, he had a very big affection for McMurphy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he saw him as the guy who could make right what the system had beaten out of his father.
Right, someone who was on his side. And at that, a white man wasn't treating him like, because there's that really terrible scene in the beginning where he's trying to get his attention and he's doing the stuff to him. And I'm like, oh, man, don't treat Chief like that.
Right.
Well, but that's that's just the opening part of the arc of McMurphy. He's still an asshole at that point.
Yes. But he brings him around.
Yeah.
So, Jason, I think it's twofold. I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Chief was so used to not talking and doing anything anymore that it was just
right.
Well, he was laying low. I mean, there are a lot of groups in this country, especially 60 years ago. You don't stick your head too far out of the sand.
But no, Chief can't buck the system or he's going to die.
But do you also think that Chief maybe had received electroshock therapy, and that was maybe a little bit, and obviously drugged, a little bit like zapped into
he's a little complacent.
Yeah.
Electroshock therapy wouldn't put somebody quite into that situation.
Sure.
The drugs probably would, but he was also committed. I think he was a criminal. Though.
He obviously can hear and he can talk.
Yeah.
And he's keeping that under wraps. But I also wonder how much of it has his lack of vocalization has also kind of become a self-imposed.
It's definitely self-imposed. And here's I don't want to bring up the same thing again, but the stuff he knows about his father.
Yeah.
Everyone in that system thinks he's deaf and mute.
Yeah.
So there's nothing they could have done to him to make him that way. He was that way when he walked in.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a personal choice, and whether he had done something during that time, I think he just carried that broom around forever and was like, "I'm just going to stay out of the damn way."
Yeah.
Yep.
That's my impression.
As long as the floor is clean, they can't look at me for nothing.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, all of the orderlies are all black. If you notice that.
Yeah.
And they're all super scared of the nurses, who are all little white women who just happen to have their buns tied too tight.
Except for Washington, who's kind of a
fucker. Washington, he will fuck about with some people. Like, he's like poking Jack in the pool and everything, and like antagonizing him a little bit. But Washington is the main bulldog. He's the main. He's the guy.
He's the heavy.
He is the heavy. He's the guy that Nurse Ratched calls for when shit gets a little out of hand.
Yeah.
funny thing with him that he says during that basketball game in 2 moments when they actually do play basketball. The way Chief walks end to end after each basket is fucking amazing.
Oh God, when he's starting to feel it,
he's just stoic, but he's I don't know, just the way he walks on the court, I'm just like, I'm all for this dude.
Well, he starts to pick up the pace a little bit, and he's jogging too, and he's
a little bit.
Yeah.
And I love the closing of the net to like keep
to block the ball.
And he pushes it back out.
It back out.
That leads to a funny line because Washington or one of the other orderlies is like, that's not right. And I don't know what Murphy says to him, but the orderly says, "You've got to be crazy," to a bunch of fucking loonies. It's like, yeah, they are crazy, dude.
Oh God, every fucking pet name that Jack has for the group is just killer.
Oh, like Hard On. He calls Harding Hard On.
Oh my God, all the shit he gives Harding when he's naming all the people on the fucking boat. And we're getting to that boat scene, but when he's naming everybody to the dock, to the harbor master, and he's like, "Yeah, this is Dr. Scanlon, the famous Dr. Scanlon, and the young Dr. Bibbett, and Mr. Harding."
Yep.
And everybody else is a doctor, but Harding
so
fucking hates Harding. And Harding is Harding is a guy that's worthy of your derision. He's an asshole. And I feel that way every time. I don't feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for everybody else except for Harding.
Well, yeah.
He presents himself as an asshole.
It's McMurphy's way of saying I'm the alpha. You might have been the alpha before, but I'm naming you.
But even then, Tabor would have said, "This guy's a fucking loser."
Right.
Yeah,
but Tabor just flies off the handle. So I mean, it's just awesome.
It's so great because he looks back at McMurphy when he says that, and it's he's just so like dismissive of him, and it's so great. But so Chief helps McMurphy get out, and he goes over and commandeers a bus. The patients go someplace pretty much every day, or at least a supervised thing weekly. Well, he takes control of that and decides to go pick up his girlfriend Candy.
Good old Candy.
Oh, Candy.
Candy's kind of sexy, by the way.
Mm-hmm. She's sexy.
I'm not too opposed to say it. I love it when she gets on the fucking bus though. She's like, "So you're all crazy?"
Oh, it's so great.
And Cheswick just nods, and she's like, yeah. And she just smiles at him.
He's furiously nodding at her, like,
she's just like into it. She's like, "Yeah, whatever, yeah, cool."
Yeah. I mean, I've been hanging out with this other loony McMurphy, so why not?
Yeah. She's she like actually likes these people. You know, it's like almost like she's like. The loonies and the criminals feel like a kinship almost. Yeah. You know, but yeah, so they go and they're going to go get on this boat and they're going to go fishing. And this comes back early. This is a callback to earlier, the first time he's in the doctor's office, and he's like, "Oh, that's a hell of a fish."
Yeah.
So now he's got this bug that he wants to go fishing, and he totally just talks his way into taking a boat out. And he's teaching them how to, like, you know, put the little
through the eyeballs.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, ooh, you know, they're just like poking away at it.
Christopher Lloyd smells his, and then I forget the other dude's name. We said it earlier. Oh, Vincent Chiavelli, when he's like has the eyeball real close to his face. It's like, so funny.
Yeah. And so, but they end up like catching some fish. You know, and they come back, and of course, you know, the harbor master has already gotten the police involved, which then got the doctor to come, and they're waiting for him when they get back. But that whole scene, the fishing scene, I mean, there are times when you see a scene in a movie and you realize this is the scene, or this is the sequence why this movie is so highly regarded, and that's it. That's the scene that most everybody is going to remember when they see this movie. So much so that they ended up making an entire remake of it for that scene with the Dream Team.
Yeah, I love the Dream Team.
Yeah.
So it's basically, this scene is so iconic that 15 years later they had to make a whole new movie for it.
That's funny because in my notes I wrote down the Dream Team bus steal.
Yep.
Yep.
And I love that movie. And little sidebar, Keaton playing that role is so great as a funny man instead of the tortured. It's I love that movie for its, I guess, subversion of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in a way.
Well, I mean, I still think of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as very comedic. I mean, this is not I mean, it's got some heavy fucking drama, but like any drama worth a shit in the 70s, it was also pretty funny.
Right. But the Dream Team is a totally funny
yes.
take on it.
Yeah, it is.
I meant.
Right. They lean on the comedy for sure. And, yeah. But this whole sequence is a funny it's an uplifting scene, you know. It's like these people feel free for the first time in a long time.
Another moment where McMurphy's therapy is working better than Nurse Ratchet's.
Right. And it's here's a situation where they could ask him, okay, why is it that they like to do these things more with you than do they like to talk in group therapy?
And the answer would be,
ask him.
I treat them like people would be
right.
The
I was going to say,
right?
They're not patients to him. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're his friends, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Except for Harding.
I think there's a little. I know what you're saying, but I think there's a small kinship between. Harding and McMurphy as well.
Well, it's the alphas, but there's still a kinship there.
But I think McMurphy has taken a large weight off of Harding's shoulders.
Well, yeah, Harding's not being poked fun at anymore.
Yeah, he assumed his role, so Harding gets to be what he wants, be left alone, and deal with his own shit in a way.
Right.
But yeah, that seems great when they come back with the fish and they're all smiling, and you're like, this is the height of their happiness, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because things are going to get bad real soon here.
Yeah.
So at this point, that's when all the doctors get back together and they're like, hey, what do we think about him? Well, he's dangerous.
Yeah.
They don't say why he's dangerous. That's important.
They don't even say he's sick.
No, he's just dangerous.
He's just dangerous. So dangerous.
And he's not. They don't even label him as a criminal either.
No, he's dangerous to what they're doing or what they're trying to do, right? And it's the way they set up that scene. It's like they're talking about him the other way, but in reality, we know how they're really calling him dangerous.
Yep.
Yeah, it's code.
Yeah,
it's like saying, well, the perpetrator. Well, no, we know what you mean by that, guys.
Yeah,
we know what you mean by that when you report that. But no, it's the same idea. Yeah.
And then Ratchet, they ask her opinion, and she plays the White Knight, and she's like, "Well, I think we can
really help him."
Yeah,
but
it's bullshit. Yeah,
because it's committing him. It's caging him essentially at that point.
Yep.
And because of that, it's at that point he's like, "Hey, 67 days, Washington. I'm getting the fuck out of here." And Washington's like, "Yeah, right. We can keep you here as long as we want.
As long as we think you're sick, you're here with us." Yep.
Which in reality, yeah.
Yeah,
you're sick forever, buddy. Sorry about you. We're going to punish you forever.
Yep. It's and they get to do that later.
Yep.
Although I would say there's extenuating circumstances that lead to that, but it's not the right thing to do still anyway. But anyway, so that's when he has that meeting where it's like, what's this about? And she's like, yeah, and it's like, these other people, there are only like 5 of the 18 people who are committed, like truly committed. Anybody else can walk out whenever they want. And, and that's, and he's like, guys, you didn't fucking tell me that if I kept antagonizing her, that they could be here forever. It's like, fuck you guys. And that's when he realizes that the system does hit back really hard because these people have been beaten by it, and they like what he brings to the dynamic. They like what he is. They like him, but they're too afraid to tell him to stop.
Right. And there's a really interesting dynamic here because they start to stand up for themselves. Cheswick wants the cigarettes.
Oh my God.
And this is something he never would have done minus McMurphy.
Yeah.
And McMurphy has instilled this in him, and it's ultimately his undoing is helping these people.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
He's like, yes, you want your cigarettes, but sit the fuck down. Like, he's like, this is not helping anyone, or me specifically.
We need to, we need to pick our battles at this point. Yeah.
Yes, and to stop it,
we're not playing from a position of power at the moment.
Right,
yeah.
And to stop it, McMurphy resorts to old McMurphy, which is violence.
Yeah.
He breaks the window. He smashes the window to get the cigarettes to try and resolve the situation, which is what he's always done. He's always fought. He's always been violent. So some of his growth is in retrograde here or whatever. He's reverted back a little. And I love this scene so much. It's another Chief moment where, they all attack McMurphy, and Chief is like, no, I'm not having any of this shit.
So he starts tossing orderlies off of him.
Yes. I wish he did a little more tossing. I wish he was a little more. I was like, he's going to throw that dude down the fucking hallway right now. But it's so good. It like totally solidifies that part of me that thought, Chief really likes this man. Mm-hmm. And he goes to bat for him. He puts himself in jeopardy, which is something he's been trying not to do for however many years he's been there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that leads to the next bullshit.
Yeah. So Chief, RP, and Cheswick are taken to get a little bit of electroshock therapy.
Yeah.
To kind of straighten them out. Now, electroshock therapy supposedly actually can help with people if they have very specific chemical imbalances.
Yes, it's still used limitedly to help with depression and bipolar disorder.
And not at the voltage that they were using.
The voltage is low, much lower than it used to be. Yeah, I mean, they were just zapping the absolute fucking shit out of people.
Right. If somebody had
an indeterminate
really bad, if it's if people have really bad depression, or they have dangerous bipolar depression, you can get a zap. It's not pleasant, but it can have a decent amount of reorganization. So it can go a long way.
The problem is it's not permanent. There's not a cure.
No.
It's just kind of like it's a short-term solution to really extreme, into really extreme violent or depressive behavior. Yeah,
and it's probably preferable in some small cases to heavy drugs, because the heavy drugs could really place you in a different situation. Whereas at least you can be normal for a while, with a little shock and a day of rest. But the amount of drugs that the people who would require this would be, you'd probably make somebody incapable of doing anything.
Yeah, right.
So there's a trade-off there, right? Like there aren't many people who would need it, but it's like.
But it was
10,000 volts or something.
It was used so indiscriminately. And,
and
any
problem, anything that wavered.
Yeah, these guys acted up. these guys acted up a little bit. We need to zap them.
I remember,
and it's probably used as punishment more than anything.
I remember the movie. Oh yeah, absolutely. Any sort of like aggressive behavior was met with electroshock therapy. Yeah,
Aggression with aggression.
I remember the movie, fucking Return to Oz. Remember that movie?
Oh yeah,
where they give Dorothy electroshock therapy at the
yeah.
beginning.
Little baby Fairuza Balk.
Fairuza Balk, yeah. It's like that could creep me out then. It's like, yeah, it's scary. It's a scary
Yeah.
idea. Just the idea of electrifying the brain.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's I mean, yeah. So, McMurphy then kind of comes back and acts, like he's been lobotomized by it, but then it's all a joke. And he's like, and now he realized he's had time to think about this. It's like, all right, I'll play your rules, but I'm going to find a way to break them. I'm going to find a way to, and basically it's, he's essentially going to become a worm. That's going to be, or that's his determination. But also, getting the fuck out of here.
Important to note, too, though, real quickly, that he offered juicy fruit to Chief and realizes that he's in there.
This is
Fold
great.
him, Chief.
This is
Fold
great.
them all.
He nudges Chief, and he gives him a piece of juicy fruit. And Chief takes it, and he says, "Thank you."
Thank you.
And he's like, "What?"
He wasn't sure what he heard.
He
so
wasn't sure if that
another.
really happened. So he nudges him again and gives him another piece.
Sorry, I had to go back to that because that's like one of my
It's
favorite.
it's
It's
really,
an
really
iconic
important.
moment. Yeah, absolutely.
And then he's like, juicy fruit. He's like, well, I'll be goddamn.
It's like, goddamn, and his reaction is so good there.
He's like stomping the floor, and he's like, holy shit. Yeah. He's the two of them together are fucking magical.
Yeah.
It's like a buddy comedy almost.
It is. And this is when, so now Chief is like an open book to McMurphy. Still, though, he keeps his secret, though. Nobody else knows that Chief is there, really. I mean, there's the basketball game, but Chief doesn't talk to anybody else, and he just kind of brooms, well, I say brooms the floor, but his last name is actually Bromden, which is like, oh yeah, the broom is perfect. Anyway, but no, he doesn't tell anybody that Chief actually is all there, but they have a plan to escape, and this is when Chief talks about his father and his father being essentially destroyed by the system, and how it's like it's in a way it's kind of a hopeless cause if you're kind of standing against the tides alone,
Well, yeah, he said something like, when I suck on when he brought the bottle to his lips, instead of drinking it in, it was drinking him in, kind of thing. Like he was being slowly destroyed by everything.
Right. And he drank because life was shit, and there was no way to break free from it. So then so they plan on, they're going to throw a party. They're going to throw a party after hours, and then Scatman Crothers, poor Scatman Crothers, he just gets bum rushed.
Orderly Turkle. What came up with that name? Sorry.
Turkle.
Well, you know what's weird about that? I don't know. I know this doesn't have anything to do with anything, but I always think that Joe Turkle was in The Shining as Floyd, right?
Oh yeah, interesting.
And then he was Orderly Turkle, several years before that in this movie, and Scatman Crothers, of course, is in the instance,
right?
But yeah,
I like it.
Turkle.
Yeah. It might have been more common of a name than we realized.
Yeah,
at one point, or at least to a certain portion of the world or the country or whatever. But so he. So they're going to basically bribe him with booze.
Booze, money, and a woman.
Booze, money, and a woman. All of which I think is also meant to kind of play up a little bit of a stereotype.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No, I mean, really. I mean, it's, here you have an older black man older than the other orderlies doing, that are more aggressive or at least more frightening to the patients. But here's a guy. It's like, well, he just wants a little drink, a little, little poontang, a little bit of, a little bit of money. And oh god, they fuck him over so bad. First, he gets caught with the woman.
Yeah.
And the old lady, old Biddy, who's
It's like, all the supervisor's here. Get the fuck back in there.
Everybody, get the fuck back in the office. What do they do to the office?
They destroy
it.
Oh, it's totally destroyed.
There is stains on the wall of how the fuck could they have done
I'm like,
that?
what blood is that? What is that?
So, did they throw their shit against the wall? Yeah, so they fuck up the office. They fuck up the... but he's like, whatever, just everybody just shut the fuck up. Go back to bed or whatever. But by then, it's too late. The party has started. The booze is there. They're giving booze to everybody. Even the vegetables. And I can't imagine that's a good idea. And at this point, it's kind of a going away party because at the end of this, they have keys to open the window, the gate in the window, and McMurphy and Chief and Candy and her friend Rose are going to leave, and they're gone. They're already gone. It's just they're going to party before they leave.
This is when you realize 100% that McMurphy has an affinity for everyone in the room, and specifically someone else we find out here in a moment. But he could have left 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And he's like, but I want to celebrate with my friends.
I want to celebrate with my friends. These are my, we've all been through a thing here.
Yeah.
And so, and then Billy has shown back on the fishing trip that he's kind of sweet on Candy.
Yeah.
And Candy's not exactly like, rebuffing him or anything, and so he asks, McMurphy, it's like, so are you gonna, marry her and stuff like that? And he's like, oh, no. It's like, it's just, this is my side piece, it's like, whatever, she's my regular Saturday night thing,
right?
To bring back Roadhouse. Then she and he's like, you've got a thing for her. It's like, hey, Candy, would you, show this guy a good time or whatever? And of course, he's freaking out because he's embarrassed, and everything embarrasses Billy, which is a big problem for him, as it turns out. But so all the other patients, like, Jack puts Candy in the room. They put him in Bancini's room because he's got like the cuffs and stuff to keep him from like rolling out of bed or whatever. Yeah. And when he puts him in the room, it's the room that's got the bed with the shackles on it. So they put her in the room, and all the patients bring Billy to, and it's like, hey, there you go, have a good time. Basically locks him in the room with the girl. And so Rose and McMurphy and Chief are just going to basically wait it out. This will probably take a few minutes. This kid's never banged beaver before. So don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. Well, it's the whole night.
Right. And I love the way
they fall asleep.
Yep. I love the way they hang on Jack Nicholson there for a good minute almost, just looking at him.
He's reflecting. Yeah,
looking at him, thinking about stuff, and it's the last time we'll really see him that
alive.
Way.
Yeah.
That way.
Yeah.
He does have some reactions after, but go ahead. They fall asleep.
And the next morning, the orderlies arrive, and the nurses arrive. And the place is a fucking wreck.
Yep.
And they get herded, basically. And it's like, well, make sure that, because the window's open. The Chief and McMurphy could have left at any
Escape
time.
has been there the whole time.
Yep. The whole time. And it's a parallel to all those people who are not committed. They could leave at any time, and they just don't.
Right.
For various reasons, but they just don't. And so they realize that Billy is missing, and they find him in the room with the woman. And of course, when he comes out, everybody applauds him. But Nurse Ratched starts to embarrass him and starts to belittle him.
Before he does that, though, the way he comes out is the most progress we've seen from Billy the entire movie, because he was treated like a human.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that Nurse Ratched has said is going to ruin him actually seemed to make him better.
Yeah, because he's like, well, you know what? Fuck off, basically.
He has one stutter. He has one stutter in the scene. He like, he's, however small it may have turned out to be, he made progress.
Yeah.
In that night, right?
Yeah, and it was because of McMurphy.
And it was because of McMurphy, and I think that is why Nurse Ratched goes full villain at this moment. I still don't see her as a full villain the entire movie. I think a lot of what she does, she thinks she's doing and means well. But here is where she's like, nope, I'm going to tear this kid down in front of you. You are going to reap what you sow, McMurphy. You know, it is what it felt like to me. She cracked at that moment where she hadn't before.
Well, the reason why I say that she was a villain before that is because there was always a power struggle between those two.
Right.
And the way that she kept moving goalposts.
But she was doing it to McMurphy, who she knew wasn't crazy.
But
I think she had the right thing in mind for the rest of the patients, I think.
To a certain degree. I would say that she is a product of that. So again, she's an agent of the system.
I agree with that.
But that doesn't necessarily, just because she thinks she's doing the right thing doesn't necessarily, to me, think that she's not a villain. Like, Dr. Doom thinks he's doing the right thing. He's a fucking villain, though, right? I mean, so like sometimes you think you're doing the right thing, or you're doing what you've been taught to do, but her complacency or her complicitness to say that, yes, this is the right thing to do, or this is the way that the system says we should do things, instead of saying, well, wait a minute, is that really the right thing or not, kind of also makes her a villain.
Yeah, I could see that. And so like you were saying, she completely tears down Billy, mostly by saying, what if I told your mother? Yep. Which immediately sends him back to his normal state, as you would call it. And he is fucking terrified.
Yep.
So she's like, no, there's no getting out of this, because he keeps saying, well, please don't tell my mother.
Right.
And it's like, no, there's nothing I can do for this. And so she locks him in the doctor's office, and he kills himself.
Yep. And once he does, McMurphy
cracks, and he's back to his. He loses all of his arc. He goes back to square one, and he tries to fucking choke a bitch.
Well, this is in the book. He like tears off a lot of Nurse Ratched's clothes.
Yeah.
In this scene,
and humiliates her.
Yes, and I think there's something about the way that they do that in this movie that feels better. Like, it's his rage. You basically just killed my friend. I'm gonna fucking kill you.
You reap what you sow.
Yes, you reap what you sow. But the humiliation part in the book, I always felt was a bit much. I like this treatment better. But the next moment I have the exact opposite feeling about. But
okay, so so basically, McMurphy gets knocked out. We hang at that point on Nurse Ratched choking, basically, or like coughing and like getting her breath back. Mm-hmm. And nobody comes to help her.
No.
Which is interesting, because like, not the other nurse, Pilbo is the other nurse's name.
Yep.
She is not an actress. She was in two things. She played a nurse in both things.
Mimi Sarkeesian.
Mimi Sarkeesian, yeah. She doesn't come to help Nurse Ratched. The other orderlies don't get her off the ground. Like, they realize, I think that was kind of meant to say, yeah, everybody realizes she's a bitch, and she kind of had it coming this time, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
But so we next see the old guy, Seefeld, has gone to get a dentist cleaning or something, and he comes back in, and Nurse Ratchet's really sweet, but she's like in her like
neck brace thingy,
neck
whatever
brace,
it is.
yeah. But you think maybe she's learned a lesson. Maybe she's learned a lesson. However, I just think the things have gone back to normal.
Yeah.
Right.
But she's actually really sweet to him. It's like, oh, I bet you're going to feel a lot better now that you've got your teeth taken care of or whatever. And she smiles, and I think it's the only time you ever see her smile in the movie.
Maybe.
But she's just, that's the way she sort of started out in the movie. That she's
a little more human.
Yeah, like you when you first meet her in the movie, she does feel a bit regimented, a bit ordered, but she does feel like she's trying to help these people. Mm-hmm. She's very calm, demeanored, and reasonable, and that just feels to me like she's just put that facade back on her face, right? Mm. Like it's her default, like passive aggressive starting point.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
she's definitely passive aggressive.
Yeah. Well, I think that at this point, because I think she is shown now as she did have a weakness, and she's got that neck brace. Obviously, she's taken a loss somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, her friend's kid is dead.
Yeah. Yeah. She's got to definitely have to
reevaluate some things.
Reevaluate things, but also reckon with the parents. Like that'll need some explaining, and how is she going to navigate that conversation?
Right, or will it even be her? Will it just be the doctor?
Right,
right. I don't know. But so there does seem to be at least a question mark there. It's like, oh, maybe she's learned something, or maybe she's, whatever.
Yeah, the cynic in me, though, I don't.
But the cynic in me also says it's like, no, just things have gone back to the way they were.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's better. I mean,
we got rid of the problem that was attacking the system.
Right. When you fire a cop that killed a guy who was unarmed, well, okay, things are back to normal now. No, not really. You got rid of the problem, but you didn't really root out something to create a solution. You just it's.
So I would argue the metaphor would even be more like we stopped the protests. Yeah. Now we can go back to the way things were, where the systemic problems still exist, but we don't care because it's too hard to fix that.
Sure, true, yeah. Well, yeah, no, that's probably a lot better of a analogy. But so Red Harding is like. Because this Seefeld's like, hey, did you hear about McMurphy? And Chief kind of perks up a little bit. He's like, yeah, he escaped. He got free, and he, knocked down an orderly and took off, or whatever. And Harding's like, oh, get fucked. He's docile as a, I can't remember what he said, but docile as a lamb. He's upstairs. He's done for. And, Chief, I think, has the realization that, yeah, that's probably true. And he just kind of goes back to sweeping the floor or whatever. Well, that night, some orderlies bring McMurphy in, and they lay him to bed. And so Chief gets up, he gets dressed. He's like, hey, let's go. Let's skedaddle. Hey, we can still make it. And McMurphy's not responsive, and he realizes that he's got a scar on his forehead, which means he was lobotomized, and he decides that he can't let him see his friend basically live his life out as this vegetable, and so he smothers him.
It's twofold, right? He smothers him so he can take his spirit with him.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It's like a Native American thing. He's like, I'm going to release you, and you are going to come with me.
Yeah, you're coming with me. Yeah, you're right, exactly. And he,
but it is a mercy killing. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and so he then takes he takes the water, the hydrotherapy station. He lifts it no problem because he's built like a goddamn mountain.
What a heroic scene this is. It's so great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he just smashes. He walks from wherever the fuck that is to wherever the fuck they sleep, and then smashes through the window. And Tabor's like, "Fuck yeah, that guy's got it."
Yep.
Yeah, fucking yelling. Yeah. And Chief's just running off into the horizon, and he's free, as is McMurphy.
It's a beautiful ending, and here is my problem with it.
Okay.
And I think what Kesey had a problem with. It's almost hinted slightly that McMurphy might have still been in there, the way he struggles against getting killed.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Lobotomy is not a permanent, technically is not a permanent incapacitation for everybody who it's done to.
Right. But the way that Kesey wrote it, I believe it was supposed to be read as permanent. The way the movie did it, they read it as maybe McMurphy was still in there and Chief killed him. Chief is supposed to be very heroic, I think, at the end of this. But leaving that little bit of doubt is kind of a disservice to Chief.
I don't know. I don't think I thought that there was anything left in there. Are you saying because he struggled?
The way he struggled and he was trying to say something, it sounded like he was like,
to me, that's just a reflex. Yeah, like he was struggling for air and he was kicking his feet because you're taking life out of someone. That's just.
I don't know if you were completely brain dead if you do that. I don't know.
Well,
I think there would be a natural.
He's not paralyzed,
but.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is with lobotomy, because like I was curious, like, okay, well, what exactly? I mean, you always hear about lobotomy. It's always been portrayed as this terrible thing. I mean, like I watched Planet of the Apes. That didn't look to be no fucking good for that one astronaut. And this certainly doesn't end too well for McMurphy. And yes, lobotomy more or less resets somebody back to a childlike demeanor, but they can be retaught things. The problem was, and the reason why it became something that is more or less banned now, is that that while that does happen for a percentage of people, that percentage is exceptionally small.
Yeah.
Most people,
it's botched.
well, they end up killing themselves, and they get worse because they are introduced to new problems, and they never can figure out why they feel the way that they do, and so they kill themselves. So there's been a lot of over the last few years, there's been a lot of requests that the Nobel Society revoke.
I've read that.
The prize that was given to that in the 40s. So
I find it interesting that it was first banned by the USSR in 1950.
Really?
Yep.
Score one for the USSR, I guess. The fucking red commies. Anyway, no.
So it was contrary to the principles of humanity.
Well, it kind of is.
Yeah.
But, I mean, again, it's the idea of, I feel like we went through a pretty significant time, in which case, to a certain extent, some areas still feel this, but I feel like in our society, we always want humanity to be shaped into something that it really isn't. We want everybody to be normal, but what is normal? It's different for different people.
Right.
And that's what always affected me about this movie is that, here's somebody that we really shouldn't like in McMurphy, right? But he treats people like people. What's so wrong with that? Why can't the other so-called professionals do the same thing? And that's what's always stuck with me with this.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah, it's and also the other thing about that ending, that everything's gone back to normal, is that once again Harding is leading that card game, right?
Yeah.
Where it was suspended because McMurphy won everybody cigarettes
Yeah.
and money,
Yeah.
and then but now that problem's been, well, literally cut out,
Yeah.
then everything has returned to quote unquote normal, and Harding's back, telling people that he thinks they're stupid. No, there is some kind of interesting behind the scenes stuff here. Just a couple of notes left, that the original person to ever play Randall McMurphy
That was Kirk.
was Kirk Douglas
Yeah.
in the early 60s, about a year after the novel came out. And he was like big on it.
Yeah.
And
He owned the movie rights, didn't he?
he ended up getting the movie rights, which he eventually sold to his son.
Yep.
And Michael Douglas won his first Oscar for producing this movie.
It made a lot of money too.
And made a shit ton of money. Like, everything that Michael Douglas is probably today is because of this movie.
Yeah, probably.
Because at the time, while this movie was out and he's winning an Oscar for producing it, he's on TV with Carl Malden on the streets of San Francisco. He's just a TV actor and the son of another really good actor. But so this is, and originally the first screenwriter was the one who introduced Douglas to Milos Forman. And Foreman came along, and it's like he had some fucking ideas. Like, he compared Nurse Ratched to the Communist Party, and being held down by that, and this movie, the fact that this is one of only 3 movies that won what they call the 5 most important Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay. Those are the last 5 every Oscar night, right?
Yeah.
The only other movie before this to do it was It Happened One Night.
Frank Capra.
Frank Capra, right? And I believe is It Happened One Night actually a Shakespeare adaptation? Maybe?
I'm not sure.
Or thematically adaptation? Anyway,
I'm not sure.
I could be wrong on that, but anyway, the fact that Cuckoo's Nest pulled off the same feat is pretty significant compared to its competition. The other Best Picture nominees were Barry Lyndon, which, while most people will say is pretty damn boring of a movie, is maybe technically the very best movie that Kubrick ever made.
That movie is gorgeous.
Yeah, exactly. Ken Adam also, he was not available for that was one of the movies that he made with Kubrick, because Kubrick loved his work with Dr. No.
Mm-hmm.
So he did, the following year he didn't do From Russia with Love, he did Dr. Strangelove, and then later worked with him again for Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, and Lyndon did win. Barry Lyndon won Best Cinematography that year.
Yeah. And then Dog Day Afternoon. So Nicholson's up against Pacino at this point. Mm-hmm. That's tough with that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had Jaws. And then Nashville. Foreman had to go up against Altman.
Yep.
So the fact that it was able to pull off all 5 with that heavy of competition was surprising. And also considering that there were several of the pre-Oscar awards that Louise Fletcher won for Best Supporting Actress, not for Best Actress.
Yeah.
So it was a difficult road to get to all 5, but they did it.
There's an interesting factoid on the cinematographer Haxel Wexler. which I've always loved that name, Maxwell Wexler. He is an absolute product of the counterculture. This guy. He also directed and wrote a movie called Medium Cool in 1969, which is kind of like a landmark counterculture film. But I mean, he shot films like In the Heat of the Night, American Graffiti. He was a visual consultant on that. He shot Days of Heaven for Michael Cimino, which is a pretty wild story in and of itself. But he was
Days of Heaven. Are you talking about Heaven's Gate?
I'm getting that with
Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate. Yeah, Terrence Malick was Days of Heaven. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, still though, Terrence Malick is a hoity-toity.
Yes. So that's a beautifully shot film. Oh my goodness, Days of Heaven. Yeah, totally getting that mixed up. Thank you. Saved me there. But he got fired by Milos Forman, which it's weird. He got fired off of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, although Wexler claims that he shot like 98% of what ended up on screen. And there's some Wexler thinks that he got fired because of his involvement with the documentary The Underground, which was about the Weather Underground, the revolutionary group.
Oh yeah.
Kind of a domestic terrorist group, which are a fascinating story in of itself. I mean, talk about counterculture. That he was interviewing members of the Weather Underground while they were fugitives from the law, which is fucking badass. Like, holy shit. So there was some speculation that he was maybe bad for publicity, so they kicked him off, but he still got the joint nomination and credit for cinematography.
The music to this movie is also super haunting.
Yeah, Jack Nitzsche.
Yeah, and he it was the main theme is played on a bent saw and a wine glass.
Yeah,
I don't think you can get any more minimalist than that.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. He's a Phil Spector guy. Jack Nitzsche. He's partially responsible for the Wall of Sound. Yep.
No, I don't. I mean, what I've been talking most of this episode. What do you guys got to bring this to a close? I think Chuck and I did carry this. As requested.
Oh wow, Nitzsche also did the score for The Exorcist.
Yes.
Did not know that. I mean, obviously he didn't do
Tubular Bells.
Yeah, right. But
the guy who did Tubular Bells, that's an interesting story too.
Mike Oldfield?
Yeah. He has ridden that for the last 47 years.
Oh yeah, he's probably rich beyond belief on that Tubular
But he keeps like remixing it and like redoing it and like, yeah, it's I've heard some stories about him. It's bizarre. Fascinating.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite like horror movie things.
Oh yeah.
Like you hear it, you immediately think of like, oh, some spooky devil shit.
And it's been kind of recreated and pastiched so many times. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I mean, I would even say that Halloween is a pastiche.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And another one of my favorites. I did some searching while you guys were talking there. I can't find Ken Kesey's specific problem with this movie anywhere other than he didn't like it. So I'm not sure. He never saw it, but he knew the story, right? He knew what
he knew what was changed, and he said, "I
there
will
was a
never
lawsuit
watch this
over
movie."
it. Yeah.
And to his dying day, he kept that promise. He never watched the movie. So whatever Stephen King's got against The Shining, he ain't got nothing on Ken Kesey.
Stephen King has some legitimate shit against The Shining. We could talk too long about that.
And King has really kind of come around too. He's made peace with it.
A little bit. But his gripes were legitimate. Sure. As great a movie as The Shining is, it's his artwork that was changed. So whatever.
Yeah.
But to end it for me, I just love this movie. I love that the Chief character is done so well. He's a paranoid schizophrenic in the book, which doesn't really come across here. But the book does a better job of showing that he is healed a lot and had an arc that he had a much smaller arc in this movie, but it's just, I just love it. Yeah, I guess that's all I want to say. I just love it.
Okay. Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really have anything to add.
Would you recommend it? I mean, that's
I don't know. I have to think about it. It had been a long time since I'd seen it, and it was really, really enjoyable and infuriating in all the same ways that I remember it.
When you say infuriating, I want to clear that up too, because I know what you mean. It's
infuriating
not
because of that justice isn't really done.
Right.
That
it's frustrating because the system does punch back.
The villain is so passive aggressive and infuriating. Right? She's just, and yeah, the chief gets away, but really, the drum beats on. Yeah. And it's just
and that's in the music too at the end.
It is.
Yeah. So I don't really I mean, gosh, this whole month, boy, we have really touched upon some themes here.
Yeah, we have.
So I think at this point, I think next month we should
we get super.
Yeah, you know what? I think I need to be proven once again that or I need to be justified in my belief that a man can fly.
I was going to say I need to know that a man can fly.
Yep.
From one hero to another, from Chief to Superman,
from an anti-hero in R.P. McMurphy to a
doesn't get much more summary than Superman, does it?
Yeah. Which Superman movies are we doing, by the way?
Superman.
All of them.
2, 3, 4. Superman Returns. Fuck those more recent.
Well, not all of them. Yes, those don't exist.
Man of Steel angers me. Batman versus Superman is.
Although 4 is just. Whoa.
No, you know what? It's fun as fuck, though. Shut up.
It is Richard Pryor in it.
No,
right?
that's 3.
No, that's 3.
Oh,
yeah,
that is
3 is fun
too. 3 is bad, but it's fun. Oh, it's bad, but it's fun. 3 and 4, I think, are some of the most fun bad movies that anybody could watch.
It's been
1 and 2 are two of the best.
3 and 4.
Yeah. But 1 and 2 are two of the best superhero movies ever made, like pure superhero movies.
We get to talk about canon films too when we talk about 4, so that'll be fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've
always enjoy talking about canon films.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it's just returning to canon films.
Yep.
First time since Delta Force.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the return of Superman and the return of canon films. Yes, I'd love to sing a new song. It'll be something like Superman does whatever a super can, flies real high in the sky, does some stuff, punches guys. Watch out! Here comes a Superman.
You can't top that. You just wrote that on the fly.
I should just take that for all of our episodes here. Oh God, that was perfect. So Super September, we called a Film Seizure audible.
We did,
and we have gone away from Sexy September. We've talked about doing a Naughty November, but some of the movies we picked would fit that, but maybe something we shouldn't do.
Yeah.
All things considered, we had some what our original lineup for Sexy September was
dude,
pretty much like if there's anything in between softcore pornography and hardcore pornography, we did it. We found
it. We would need a month that begins with R for a raunchy
Rocktober.
I watched Rocktober.
One of the films we planned was Paprika, Tito Brass's Paprika, and I watched it just recently, and oh my god, it is not softcore porn. It is just bordering on hardcore pornography. Like every single kink you can imagine is that. There's water sports in that movie. Like it
water sports.
It's not a hockey movie.
Nope, not a hockey movie.
It is something else, man. I couldn't believe it. I was like, yeah, there's no fucking way we could have talked about this movie.
So So we're retooling that. In the meantime, we're going to watch all the Superman movies instead. So so come back here for that. Hey, and that happens on Wednesdays, by the way, guys. Did you guys know that?
I did.
Wednesdays
what happens
are new.
Yeah, new episodes of Film Seizure. What about Mondays?
Mondays are new episodes of Monster Mondays with me.
What about
three
Saturdays?
things you love, right? Yeah, and Saturdays.
3 things I like about Monster Movie. Yeah, even if Monster movies poop.
Yeah.
Saturdays.
That reminds me, I need to do Monster. I'll get around to that. Anyway.
Saturday, Geoff.
What's on Saturdays?
Saturdays is 00 Saturdays.
Yes.
James Bond essay by me. And then Fridays, you can hop over to my other website, bmovieanima.com. We got stuff happening over there. For Monster Mondays, this upcoming Monday, it is Shivers. David Cronenberg's Shivers.
Yes, it is.
And then over at B Movie Anima on August 28th, Penitentiary.
All right.
That's a good flick. So, anyway.
Does that one have Mr. T in it? Is he in the second one?
No, I don't think he's in either the first or the second one. I think maybe in the third one.
I thought he was in the second one. I could be wrong.
I could be wrong on that, but he might be in the third one. He's definitely not in the first one.
Okay.
Pity the fool that don't know which movie he's in.
That Penitentiary is a really, really good movie. I'm glad I got to say some things there too. So Anyway, check that out. All those places. You can find Film Seizure at SoundCloud, at Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify. Did I leave any of them? I don't know. I may have left some of them out.
Lots of places.
Just go over to filmseizure.com. Yeah. Our stuff's there. Go into Facebook and Twitter. Follow us at the Facebooks. And just go type in the Facebooks.
On the Googles.
On the Googles. We got stuff there. At Film Seizure, both Twitter and film and the film books. And the face twits. Until next week when we launch ourselves into the stratosphere of Superman business. I am Geoff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.